Please help me welcome our speaker today, Reverend Robert Yarnall.
Sometimes we find truth in surprising places. Every civilization has a way to pass along its values and wisdom, and almost always that is done through stories. We yearn for narratives that inspire us, that tell us who we are and who we can be. In short, we long for mythology. Now, the word myth has come to mean something fake, as in, oh, that's just a myth. But in truth, myths represent the highest values that we share, the highest aspirations. They're full of rich metaphor and vivid characters and represent different parts of our humanity. When life gets tough, we long for meaning and a narrative that will provide it. Religion can and should do that, certainly, through rich stories like those found in the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, and countless other texts. But for many people, those old tales had to become stale by the middle of the 20th century, especially as interpreted by overly literal and dogmatic institutions. Many people were eager for a new hope. And one film franchise delivered, Star Wars. Now, based on that title, you might think these films chronicle and celebrate military ventures in a galaxy far, far away. But I believe it's not the battles in outer space that set this franchise apart, but rather the battles of inner space, the battles within ourselves, especially as we move into the two sequels, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. The focus moves toward the spiritual, using language and metaphors that are amazingly similar to the way we speak here. Consider that in New Thought, we don't speak of a traditional deity, a man or even a woman in the sky. Rather, we speak of God as divine intelligence, not so much a being as an energy or force. Now, since it's the ultimate one, we could just call it the Force. On this community's website, you state, New Thought holds that infinite intelligence or God is everywhere, operating in and through all life, never separate from anyone or anything. Well, according to Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Force is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. Sounds familiar. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. Yoda said, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. God is energy present within us, but first we have to feel it and know it, not intellectually, the way we know arithmetic. We're invited to know God the way we know gravity, as a force. But getting to that place, I think, is a practice, not a decision. It's a kind of mastering of the self, knowing its tricks and tendencies and transcending them. According to the Buddha, though one should conquer 1,000,000 men on the battlefield, yet he indeed is the noblest victor who has conquered himself. In Hinduism, the Bhagavad Gita says, that man is disciplined and happy who can prevail over the turmoil that springs from desire and anger here on earth. And in the Tao Te Ching, we read, he who conquers others has physical strength. He who conquers himself is strong. True to form, in the Star Wars movies, especially in The Empire Strikes Back, Luke enters a spiritual boot camp to transcend his limited ways and radically shift his relationship with reality. Yoda tells him, you must unlearn what you have learned. And he begins to teach him the way of the Jedi, which could almost be called the way of the Buddha or the Tao or many other names. Now, Yoda has Luke levitating rocks and basically defying gravity. But when he tells Luke to levitate his spaceship, he tries and fails, saying it's impossible. So Yoda, who's around 2 feet tall and 900 years old, concentrates and causes this enormous spacecraft, many tons of metal, to rise up from a swamp and float to the shore. Amazed, Luke says, "I can't believe it." To which Yoda responds, "That is why you fail." Faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain, according to Jesus, and George Lucas just updated that concept for modern times. As a child, this was probably my first exposure to this new thought concept. We shape our experience by what we believe. I can't believe it. That is why you fail. If we stay with our spiritual practice, whatever it's called, a new us emerges, doesn't it? But it's not easy, unlearning what we've learned. I don't know about you, but sometimes I cling to some of my old beliefs and want to maintain a status quo of good enough. I'm used to it. But Yoda says, train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. But this is detachment, a classic Buddhist concept. If we identify with our possessions, with material world, we can forget our true nature. But ultimately, it's about inner attachment. Over and over in self-mastery, in the way of the Jedi or the Buddha or the Christ, we confront certain inner tendencies like greed, anger, and jealousy, or wishing ill on our fellow human beings. In New Thought, we often speak of the ego, that part of us that believes in the illusion of separation and identifies with it as the truth. Now, rather than speak of the ego, Star Wars speaks of the dark side of the Force, which I think is a really New Thought way of putting it. After all, if God or divine intelligence is all there is, we can't say this is God and this isn't. It may be God vibrating at a very low rate, but it's still God. So speaking of the one power, the one force as having a dark side makes sense, I think. If we're luminous beings, or if Jesus, as Jesus said, we are the light of the world, then moving away from that, forgetting our nature as light, moves us into darkness. So what do we know about the dark side? Well, Yoda tells us fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. When we forget, we move into the illusion of darkness. Fear, anger, greed, hatred. These can capture us for decades. Whole nations and civilizations can be lost in them. But we don't need to look to the world out there to see it. We can see it in our own lives. And we may think, oh, come on, my little world isn't that important compared to the fear, anger, hatred, and suffering of the world at large. But in New Thought, we take responsibility for our self-mastery. Again, from this community's website, godasme.com, quote, by being mindful of our positive thoughts and focusing on inner transformation, we can transform our external world. And we like to think, I like to think, come on, I'm doing fine. I may struggle with some issues, but I'm no Darth Vader. Not true. None of us in this room right now is literally Darth Vader. I doubt you've exploded any planets lately, for example. But here's where Star Wars gets really interesting. In the first movie, Star Wars: A New Hope, released in 1977, Darth Vader is really just a classic villain. It's good versus evil, and there was never a better embodiment of pure evil than Darth Vader. But in the sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, released in 1980, the plot thickens and gets much more interesting from a spiritual perspective. Yoda sends Luke on a kind of quest into a dark and mysterious cave. Luke asks what's in the cave, and Yoda replies, "You will find only what you bring in," which is an interesting statement. Seeing that Luke has his lightsaber with him, Yoda tells him, "You will not need your weapons." But Luke, ever the young rebel, ignores this advice. And so, since you find only what you bring in, and Luke brings in weapons, he meets a vision of Darth Vader in the cave. He imagines that he will need his weapon, so of course he does. And the cave provides a duel. But here's where it gets really, really interesting. This, I believe, is the most important moment in all the Star Wars films. And maybe you've forgotten it. So let me lay it out. Luke battles with this vision of Darth Vader, lightsabers clashing until Luke strikes a fatal blow and lops off the head of Darth Vader. The dark helmet rolls a bit in the dirt, whereupon the mask disappears in a puff of smoke, revealing the face of Darth Vader for the first time. And the face is Luke. This freaked me out as a kid. Oh my God, it's Luke under the mask. Now, by 1980, I was certainly sophisticated enough to realize this was some kind of metaphor or allegory, but not yet experienced enough to know what on earth this could mean. Still, it was so compelling, I never forgot it. Now, years later, I encountered shadow work, and that scene made perfect sense. In shadow work, we learned that we all contain everything. The universe is holographic, meaning each bit contains the whole. There are parts of myself I've repressed, called bad, and locked away. That's the shadow. And when we see those parts of ourselves in others, those parts we've disowned, we judge them harshly. We want to battle that outside manifestation as a way of saying, I am not that, and if necessary, I will kill it. By owning those disowned parts of ourselves, understanding them, we can master them. As long as they remain disowned, we react to them, and we're at their mercy. But when we know and truly accept that we all have everything, we are at choice and can respond rather than react. What we resist persists. But once we accept and understand that we too have a specific shadow trait, our judgment lessens. And we can respond with wise action and transcend that trait, be it arrogance, insecurity, quick temper, or any other. Now, back to Darth Vader. In case we didn't get that Luke has the same potential for evil that Vader has, in case we missed that Vader is Luke's shadow, we have one of the most famous moments in all of cinema, which I will now quote verbatim. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. Ba, 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 no. But Luke knows it's true. He can feel it. And that's just good storytelling. And it's also deep. There's a reason these movies, these stories resonate. The hero also has the villain within him. The villain is his father. And by the third film, Return of the Jedi, when Luke goes to confront Vader, he first refuses to fight. Yoda has taught him that a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. But the Emperor, who really is an embodiment of pure selfishness and rage, forces Luke to watch through a window as his friends' spaceships are destroyed in battle. Give in to your anger, the Emperor tells him. With each passing moment, you make yourself more my servant. And Luke resists the urge to attack. Try as he might, the Emperor isn't getting through. So he appeals to his compassion. Give yourself to the dark side. It is the only way you can save your friends. You see how good the ego is at manipulating us? But Luke still stands firm. Then the Emperor discovers that Leia is Luke's sister and tells Luke, if you won't join us, perhaps she will. And that is when Luke loses it. He lunges at the Emperor with his lightsaber, only to be blocked by Darth Vader. So naturally, the Emperor laughs, a classic villain's laugh, because he knows that his plan is finally working. Luke is now truly angry. And he goes after Darth Vader with ferocity. Yes, use your aggressive feelings. Let the hate flow through you, the Emperor prods. And Luke does until he cuts off his father's hand and sees wires. Luke, too, by this point, has an electronic hand and realizes he and his father are, in fact, alike, both consumed with rage. He's on the verge of becoming another Darth Vader, operating like an unconscious robot. And right then, Luke does something extraordinary, perhaps unique in these kind of summer blockbusters. He lowers his lightsaber, turns it off, and announces that he won't fight. In fact, he knows there's still good in his father. He has felt it. The Emperor finds this absurd, announcing that compassion will be his undoing. And so lightning spews from the Emperor's hands, and he attacks Luke, announcing he will now kill him. Luke, in fact, screams and cowers in agony. The Emperor throws more and more lightning, and just when all hope seems lost, in a kind of symbolic tour de force, rejecting the pure evil that the Emperor represents, Darth Vader picks up the Emperor and throws him down a hole 10,000 feet deep to his death. Luke was right. The hero may have the villain within him, but the villain also contains the hero. Darth Vader redeems himself. The whole plot depends on Luke loving his enemy, finally refusing to fight or give in to hate. Before Vader dies, he says to Luke, "Just for once, let me look on you with my own eyes." And so Luke removes the mask, revealing an almost heartbreakingly vulnerable man underneath. As he dies, we hear a beautiful, delicate rendition of the Empire theme, as if to underline the potential good within all of us, even those who have their own evil soundtrack. The theme itself is transformed. Bum, 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 dum, bum, 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 ba-dum. The dark side, with all its firepower, loses to the light side, the truer representation of us, our best selves. Destruction is more exciting on film and in our imagination than quiet compassion and responsibility for our inner state. These movies bring many people in through the action-packed battle sequences, but these spiritual journeys are what set Star Wars films apart and make them modern mythology. Can we love the enemy? Can we believe that our Darth Vaders are capable of redemption, or that our victory may be in love, not in resorting to anger? It seems to me that we join the so-called dark side when we answer its rage with our own, its bullying with our own. It is indeed tempting to join into the fight. It pulls us in like that tractor beam that pulled the Millennium Falcon into the Death Star. But someone turned that tractor beam off. An old man who no one took seriously. And remember, who trained Luke and passed along this powerful ancient wisdom. A 900-year-old master, about the size of a loaf of bread. You in this room have more power than you know. Your wisdom is luminous. Your persistent love can change the energy field around you. And whether it ever shows up in the news or not, you can change and even save the world right here, right now. Each of us may be the last Jedi, our only hope. We are the hero we've been waiting for. The Force is strong in you. I can feel it. Namaste. God bless. And may the Force be with you.